also had done some things that were really hard to fix. Like when you make your staircase this wide, and it's supposed to be 3 feet wide, so that if I have a heart attack in my bedroom, the EMTs can carry me down. And if I have this little staircase, I mean that was enough for the loft, right? But it's not really enough for functionality for the things that we need, that we hope never need, but might need. So and then they made the steps different heights. And one of the things in the code is that your steps all have to be the same height, so that somebody who can't tell where steps are doesn't trip because they can't see the step. So they just said, okay, what if we tear this house down and build another one using our plans that we've already gotten stamped by the engineer? And the county's like, oh, you know what? That'd be so great, because then you tear it down like we told you to, and we'll be happy. Everybody will be happy. In fact, we'll loan you a bulldozer to knock it down with. So the big day came to knock down the house, and all the engineers from the county came out to watch this little mud house turn into a puff of dust, and it broke the bulldozer. It broke the bulldozer. Yes, they ended up having to rent a trailer-mounted power sprayer to cut this thing into pieces. But they took those pieces and they threw them in 50-gallon drums, filled it with water, and let it soak like this, and made the next house out of the same cob. With the help of a bunch of engineers who now are like excited about cob because they saw that it really was strong enough, because they were worried. Their job is to make sure nothing gets built that they don't know to be strong enough, to be fireproof enough, to be safe enough. So now they knew, and so they're really excited about this house, and they came out and helped, and they were able to build it back better than it had been before.
Which county?
It was south and east of Sonoma. I have to look it up. But there's another county where friends of mine had done the homework. It had taken like 10 years to do the homework to get straw clay approved as an insulation material. And one of their friends was told by their building department, no, you can't use straw and clay for your insulation. You show me one county in the state that's approved that, and I'll let you do it. So, well, here's the approval for Marion County, and they say, and the guy was true to his word, says, okay, if it's good enough for Marion, it's good enough for us. And so slowly things change. Rocket heaters, I heat my house in Cleveland. It was sometimes $1,000 in a month for propane, and now it's $100 a year for scrap wood for my rocket heater, which is just a super efficient little wood stove that doesn't produce soot or creosote, so I can run the hot gas through a bench made out of cob, and as a thermal battery, it stores the heat and then slowly releases it overnight. And I sit on it, and my butt's warm, and I don't care if the rest of the house is cold. But that's dropped my expenses considerably by thousands of dollars a year, and I get to go do things like this instead of making more money to pay the heating bill. And it's more comfortable to have something big and warm than it is to try to push warm air around the house, because air is a very, very poor medium for heat transfer for comfort of human beings. Because when you blow air across your skin, what happens? Evaporates water and cools your skin, even though you're trying to warm your skin. So you're blowing warm air across you. You're actually also cooling yourself. And if it stops blowing for whatever reason, all the hot air rises, so your feet are cold. And if your feet are cold, your face can be 80 degrees and you don't care. You're not comfortable if your feet are cold. But if your feet are warm because you're on a warm bench or a warm floor, it can be 60 degrees in that room and you're still like, that's fine. So having passive heating and cooling principles built into your house makes a huge difference. And part of that is that if the bit that's supposed to keep you warm is bigger than you, you will stay warmer. And if the bit is cooler than you, you'll stay cooler. the rocket heater in my uninsulated garage that's now an apartment where my in-laws live is uh, warms the floor up and keeps that whole place warm through the winter. But in the summer, it sucks all the heat out of the room into the floor because the floor doesn't have any insulation in it. So it's like an air conditioner, only it's free and it doesn't make all that noise. So anybody have any other questions about Cobb stuff? You want to play in the mud with us?
I'm good for right now.
You good for right now?
This is my neighbor Mark.
Are you guys going to be 3D printing that stuff soon?
Oh, no, because unfortunately when you go to 3D print this stuff, they usually add like pervasive plastic fibers, like microfibers. So now you have this huge pile of unusable soil that's got plastic fibers in it instead of a little it's really disappointing.
Yeah.
There's one place that's done it with rice hulls as a sticky, as a glue, and then 3D printed houses with that, and that's really kind of cool. But the domes are a bit goofy for human beings to live in, because if you try to divide it up, it doesn't feel cool anymore, and your bed won't stick against the side of the dome. There's this arch space that is missed.
We like flat walls to hang our pictures.
We like flat walls to hang our pictures on. Yes. Yeah, I'm imagining that, hanging that picture frame like this against the dome. Yeah. So you're Mark, the next door neighbor?
Yeah.
Yes, Mark, the next door neighbor. I'm Mud. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Yes. Beautiful place you live here.
Yeah. I wish I was living here.
Ah.
Just owns land too.
Yeah. Nothing built there yet.
Yes.
What's your real name?
My real name is Chris. My dad named me Christian, and I asked him what if I wanted to become a Buddhist, and he said that wasn't his problem. So.
At least he was okay with that.
Yeah. Well. Yeah. It's easy as parents to forget that little thing about like agency, that our children get to do what they want to do. It's so inconvenient, but very important.
So you've built houses, whole houses with mud.
Yeah.
And the permitting process, you did tell that one story, but in general, is it tricky?
Oh yeah, it's failed every other time, but that one
Yeah.
story was just really cool, so I keep repeating it. No, so
Yeah. I don't.
earthen walls, earthen wall systems are now part
You
of
can have it if you want.
the 2020. They're an appendix to the 2020 IBC, International Building Code.
Yeah, I'll-
So if you're trying to build something and they say, what are you talking about? You can say, well, because again, their job is to make sure nothing is built that they don't that they don't know to be safe. And if you say, okay, it's not adopted here yet, but the 2022 International Building Code includes an appendix on earth and building, and I'm building to that qualification for this seismic zone, they say, oh, could I get a copy of that? And you give them a copy of that, and then you might have to have other discussions, or it might be simpler to get an engineer to approve plans. But yes, it's entirely possible. But the thing is to make sure that you give them what they need in order for them to be comfortable that what you're doing is safe.
And those codes are being published in 2020. Is that what you
The
said?
2021 code.
2021.
Yeah. The 2021 International Building Code, the IBC, has an addendum for building with earth.
Mom, Brunchburn Army is here.
Brunch Army? Is that what you said?
And yeah, so there's a lot of people who like just get really excited about this and go build something without code permission. There is such a thing as, you've seen back in 10 years ago, when we bailed the banks out because the banks were too big to fail. If they failed, it would be catastrophic for everything. So too big to fail. We can't allow this to happen. My response to that is what I call too small to fail. If you build something that you can afford to walk away from, that you did because you liked it, and the worst case scenario is still okay, then you can do whatever you want. And that's an immensely freeing thing. So some people, I know too many people with tiny houses that they paid $60,000 for the tiny house, and then they were told, no, you can't park that there, and they don't have a place to park it. So now they have the rent of the place they're staying to try to while they figure it out, and they have the rent of storage space for their tiny house and the mortgage on the tiny house. So they're triple screwed. Whereas if I go to somebody who has a piece of property and say, here, let's make a deal. I'll build a little cottage for you. I'll make it less than 200 square feet so that even if you get caught and you're not allowed to use it as a cottage, it's still a shed. Okay, but I'll build something that you like. I get to live in it for 5 years. When I'm done, it's yours. And if you like me, I either build you another one or you charge me low rent. If you don't like me, you raise the rent or tell me to go away. That's fine, because 5 years, it's yours. It's not mine anymore. You make a deal like that, okay? So that there's something in it for the other person and something in it for you. Get a place to put something. Let's do an example. If it costs $600 a month to rent a room around here, and instead you spent $6,000 building a cottage. If you walked away from that cottage at the end of 5 years, you would walk away with $30,000 in your pocket, compared to having rented a $600 a month place. And it's hard to find a $600 a month place anymore. But that's the one I did the math on. So that's the example I give. Now, let's just say you're there for a year and you have a fight with the person whose land it is, or you get a better job someplace else, or something happens. Well, you still walk away with $1,800 in your pocket, compared to having just stayed in the rented space, because the rented space is going to suck you dry regardless. It's just how that works. It's part of the system. But a year and you're still ahead. 5 years, you're way ahead. Worst case, you're there for 3 months. The code guy shows up and says, you can't live in a shed, get out of here. It happens. And okay, so compared to having just stayed in my apartment, I am out, and so let's say I've got the building half built. I'm out $1,800 compared to where I would have been if I just stayed in my apartment. So I lost, but it's a crash landing that I can walk away from. And maybe I enjoyed camping the whole time because I did it in the summer, and maybe I also didn't have my cable bill or any of the other garbage that comes with that apartment, and I got healthier, so there's some benefits to it. But okay, if I crash landed 3 months out, 6 months out with and with money out that I'm missing, I did something I could actually walk away from, instead of the $60,000 tiny house that I can't walk away from. I have to figure out what I'm going to do next. So I call it too small to fail. Figure out something like this. And most of the easiest answers for too small to fail involve having really good relationships with your extended family, and like living in somebody's basement or attic or something. I paid for college I lived in my aunt's garage, in the roof of my aunt's garage, in the storage space up there, and I finished it for her in exchange for living there, because she didn't have the money to make a rumpus room, but she sure wanted those video games out of there. So I was there for a year in exchange for $400 in a couple of weekends to drywall it and paint it. And I had to climb down the rickety folding stairs every day and go to the other end of the house to use the bathroom, and I had to have a really sketchy kitchen set up. But I got out of college with no debt, so it worked. I mean, and in that neighborhood, I couldn't have built a cottage. I couldn't have built an outbuilding because it was a nice suburban neighborhood where they have standards, but they couldn't see what I was doing in the top of the garage, so they had no control over it, and I just did it. And if I'd gotten thrown out, that was about half of what my deposit would have been on anything else. So 2 months, and I'm ahead of the game. Lasted a year, and I was way ahead. It was good. So yeah, there's all sorts of opportunities like that. My business partner got sick of his $1,200 a month rent, and there was a house that was sitting across the street from his mom, a mile from our office, that was falling apart because the woman who'd owned it had brought her kids in when they lost her daughter and her daughter's family in when they lost their house. So they started making this house bigger. They added a second story, and they redid the roof, and they did another roof, and they did all this stuff to it, and we're about half done when Mom died. And the bank wouldn't give them a mortgage on it. Called in the mortgage, made them move out because, well, they had lost their previous house from just the world being awful. I don't even know, it doesn't matter what, they couldn't get another loan. So this building was slowly rotting, sitting there with no siding on it, just the OSB stuff. My business partner couldn't do anything with it. I couldn't do anything, but together, our business bought it for $14,000 in an area where houses were $100,000 to $200,000. We bought it for $14,000, and he camped out in it for a year, and we lived on ramen while he paid the business back. And now he's got a very nice house that didn't have a mortgage, and it was because he just found something he could do and lived in it. And I mean, the things that were a problem, like the septic, would probably have to be replaced, but we found one of our clients is a septic installer who gave us the secret, which is that it takes them 3 years to throw you out if you have a failed septic. So you start throwing 20s in a shoebox when you see that situation, and even if they catch you, and they haven't actually caught him yet because the rule that requires you to replace the septic with something modern is tied to a bank, and he didn't use a bank, he bought it from the bank, so there's no check on it, so he's fine still, and someday they'll make him replace it, but in the meantime, he just keeps throwing 20s in a box for it. There's all sorts of, if your neighbors see that you're making the place better by what you're doing, you're going to get away with whatever you're doing for longer. If they see that the piles of trash are disappearing, they're not going to complain too much about the siding that you use on your house and so forth. There's ways of making things work longer until you can afford to do whatever you want. And using materials that don't cost anything is a really good start. At least for me, because I like mud.
What was your degree in?
English and architectural history. Yeah, so
And you live in Cleveland?
Cleveland, Ohio. Yep.
And do you do like work? I think you said you did workshops.
We do workshops, or we'll do we'll go and build a pizza oven for somebody, but usually we like to try to get people to come and participate and see how it works and enjoy it. Or we'll write articles about it for people or help them to make the designs. So we do a lot of consulting. Some big buildings, like we're going to be doing a cottage in Huntsville, Alabama, coming up in summer and fall, late summer to fall, at a tiny house venue. So that's going to be a lot of fun to have it, to compare how cool it stays without an air conditioner versus a tiny house on wheels or something.
You'll find out in Alabama.
That's the point. Yeah, with a living roof. I want to be able to say, hey, look at this.
Is that the Hobbit home they were talking about?
That's going to be at his house. We just have to figure out.
We take a break again. She's got a bunch of hot food.
Oh, no, that's not a break. That's
or,
a done.
Or grab
Yeah.
a plate. Oh, come on.